Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
Welcome to another episode of the For Love and Money podcast. Today I interview Kirrily Graham. Kirrily is founder of Dovetail Social Enterprises, and through Dovetail, she is on a mission to transform how small and medium-sized charities operate, creating more sustainable organisations by empowering micro, small and medium-sized businesses to develop successful charity partnerships that don't just raise the funds they need for their projects, but also become social impact investors. And in so doing, building the charity's capacity and capabilities to amplify the great work that they do in the world. Kirrily's combined experience of working in the nonprofit industry, running her own micro, small and medium-sized business, as well as working in the corporate sector, has led her to create Dovetail, her own social enterprise to empower partnership between micro, small and medium-sized businesses and small but mighty grassroots charities. Now, if you're a leader of a small to medium business and you want to make a greater difference in the world through simple and powerful partnership with grassroots charities that will help them scale, this episode is for you. Kirrily shares with us how her background in the charity sector, as well as her own personal burnout experience, opened her eyes to a massive gap that small charities are struggling with. The TED Talk by Dan Pallotta that got right inside her head and spurred her to take action, and how all of this led to her starting Dovetail Social Enterprises. She shares with us the really smart model that she's created through Dovetail that benefits both charity partners and the for-profit businesses who join her program. And she talks about some of the charity partners within her program, as well as the vetting procedure she goes through in selecting them. Kirrily also highlights the different levels of partnership a business can come in at. And at the top level, she talks about charity challenges, which are a wonderful opportunity to fundraise while challenging yourself and potentially even your team or your clients. And finally, she talks about her vision for scaling the program to create more impact. Now, if after this episode you're interested in learning more about Dovetail's program, head to the show notes where you'll find Kirrily's contact details and some other links. Meantime, let's get into it. Kirrily, welcome to the For Love and Money podcast. I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Wonderful to be here with you, Carolyn, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. So I'd love your take on whether you think there is a role for love in business.
It's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that is becoming more and more important to us now. I think that there's definitely been an evolution where we are looking to have something that is really meaningful for us in the work that we do, and whether that is described as love or whether that is something that is, that we just really hold a passion for, or we might describe in another way. I do think it's becoming, something that's just really, really highly valued for us in the thing we spend most of our time in.
Absolutely. And isn't it funny that, you hear people say without even thinking, I love my job, or, they use that word. And yet when you ask about love in business, it's kind of like, ooh, maybe that's a bit too much, I find that fascinating, right? Because it's clearly there in different ways. But I think there is a reserve there that is starting to break down. So Kirrily, I would love you to share with our listeners your background story that led to where you are today with Dovetail Social Enterprises.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Carolyn. Look, it's definitely one of those accidental career changes for me. Social enterprise, I think for a lot of people, is still not that well known in the sort of general business community. But when I discovered what social enterprise was, it just felt like the perfect fit. It was like I put it on and it was like, yep, I'm holding on to this one. And it really came from being involved in the charity sector for over 18 years. I started out as a volunteer, just doing a bit of fundraising and helping out with a lot of administrative stuff, getting, databases and CRMs in place, and ended up taking a paid role part-time and being on the board of a small grassroots charity. And it was something I definitely loved. It was something that was my complete passion project. And over the years, that just kept growing and growing. And as much as I loved my career in training and development, it really, I think that the decision came after about 6 years of even having my own business, a training company, that I decided to take the leap full time into my role with the charity, because it just inspired me every day. It was tough, it was challenging, but it really was the thing that connected with my heart. And that's that's been a really interesting and amazing journey. But there was definitely a point in time where I realized, as much as I loved it, there was just so much that didn't work. And there was so much that I experienced working in the charity sector that I just sort of got so indoctrinated into it that I had become blind to how much of it didn't work as well. And it, when I had that sort of light bulb moment and that aha moment, that's where I think the change to going into social enterprise really opened up a lot more for myself in what I could see I could achieve in my life and for what was really important to me. And so I think that's certainly been a very, it's been a roller coaster of a ride, but I feel like I'm in a really, really good space with that now.
Can I ask you, it's really interesting that you talk about, you loved it, but so much didn't work, but you became blind to that. And I'm curious as to what that light bulb moment was that made you look at it with fresh eyes.
It was probably a couple of things. There was on the sort of the downside of it, it was actually experiencing personal burnout.
Yeah,
I was completely burnt out. The amount of hours that I was contributing to that particular role, and at that time I was actually still running my own business. So it was a role with the charity that kept growing and growing and growing, and I ended up doing more time in that than I was in my own business. And that really came from that experience of having, as a charity, not having the resources, the money, or the staff to do a lot of things. And when you rely on volunteers and that to sort of contribute, if that particular volunteer all of a sudden got a full-time job or couldn't come in because they were sick or whatever reason, you had to pick up that additional work or those projects that they were working on. So, that takes its toll after a while.
Absolutely.
And then on the flip side was somebody sharing a TED talk with me, which was a guy called Dan Pilotta. I believe it was 2013 that he actually did the TED talk, but it was 2015 roughly when I saw it. And I listened to this guy and I was like, this man is inside my head. He is everything that I've experienced over the past, sort of 10, 15 years. But he's saying it so eloquently and so succinctly about what doesn't work. And it was at that moment when, I really got to see that, yes, there is so much that is dysfunctional and doesn't work within the charity sector. And this is why. And, and it was just like, wow, I actually run businesses, but I can't, I felt like I couldn't run this charity effectively to grow and scale it. And that was why. It was really, what he covered in that sort of 18 minutes just really was the light bulb moment.
Amazing. And we will include a link to that TED talk. I remember watching it a few years ago. I think I probably need to refresh my mind. But at the time, I remember thinking, yes, and I'm not in the charity sector, but I do know a lot of people who are. And, the experience you've talked about is one I hear all the time. People loving what they do, the purpose that they're serving, but just burnout, not enough resources, and going around in circles and politics and all sorts of things. Yeah. But that TED talk, we'll include that link in the show notes. I think it's a great one for people to listen to. So I'm going to ask you to tell us about Dovetail Social Enterprises, but before you do, Kirrily, can you just explain to our listeners, some of whom may not be aware of what a social enterprise is?
So yes, I can't count the number of times I've been asked if I sort of focus on social media, when I say I have a social enterprise. So yes, there is a lot of confusion that's out there. But social enterprise, if you looked at sort of the range of, if you had one end of a scale, a charity, and the other end, regular corporate business, social enterprise sits in the middle. And it is a business model. It's not a particular legal entity in Australia at the moment anyway. That may change. But it really does sort of fit where it is a business that operates through sale of services or products. And they use the profits for a social purpose. And so it could look in a couple of different ways. There isn't sort of a strict model on this either, but traditionally how it might look would be that the profits are given away to a charity. So the likes of something like the Who Gives a Crap toilet paper.
Yep.
Through to other organisations that may actually focus on employing a part of the community that would not normally be employed. So it might be people with disabilities. It might be that they have some other social challenges, and they can provide a place for them to work and get upskilled. And that could be something just as simple as shredding documents from businesses as well. So, it's a service that gets provided, but it employs, a particular part of the community, right through to the other side of actually providing products or services that really, have a positive impact on people and planet as well. So there's a lot of kind of different models that it might form in, but they exist purely for a social purpose, to look after people and planet. And so that could be in a not-for-profit model. So a lot of charities are now developing their social enterprise model, but it can also be in that for-profit model as well.
And this sector is growing, isn't it? My understanding is it's growing phenomenally.
Yes. Some of the latest stats that have come out, and I think when Social Enterprise Australia actually did this research, I think we were all surprised about it, just how large it was and how much it did actually contribute back to the Australian economy. So it is booming within Australia, but they now say that it's a similar size to the mining industry within Australia, which is incredible.
Wow.
Yes, I know. Incredible.
Wow.
Yes, it employs as many people as the mining industry. So that's that sort of.
Does it get subsidised by government as much as the mining industry?
It doesn't. But what is actually really fabulous is at the moment the government are actually seeking input from social enterprises to how they can support them, because they do see that there is an opportunity for the sector, if you like to call it that, to actually provide a lot of services that the government can't currently do. So they're consulting and finding out what do social enterprises need that can help them grow and expand and perform better as well. So there is actually has been a very big change in that with the change of government this cycle. So I think we'll be seeing a lot more support coming through.
That's fantastic. So now tell us about Dovetail Social Enterprises. What is the business? You went from charity, burnout, loved what you did, Dan Pallotta TED Talk, and is that what drove you to start Dovetail?
It certainly sparked the thinking around how to do things differently. So what Dan actually talks about in his talk is that the charity model is really, really has the lid stuck on it. There's a ceiling there, because we expect charities to run very effectively, have great governance, perform really well, and utilise all their money, the funds that they get in, so strictly. But they're not allowed to actually spend money on getting the best staff or being able to market themselves, to be able to really support and have the resources that they need to do their jobs well. And we have this, it's just incredible expectations of how they should operate, but they've got their foot nailed to the floor in regards to how they can actually do that. And so when you understand the sort of the principles, and this is a sort of a common conversation that I used to have when I was in the charity with people that were in the business sector, and particularly sort of the small to medium size, is that as a charity, we often complain about how much money goes to overheads. And I was the overhead. And so, when you actually put that context of that is a human being that's sitting in front of you, you start to understand that it is actually a business. The charity is an organisational business that needs to operate. It needs to pay staff. It needs to pay insurances. We still have bank fees. We still have to pay workers' compensation. There are so many of the sort of same costs that you would have to run a business as you would to have a charity. And yet our expectation was, and this is a benchmark, it's not a rule as such, but charities only spend 20% of their revenue on operating costs, which in other words is their overheads. Now, if you were a business and you were operating at 20% of your revenue on expenses, that means you would be operating at 80% profit.
Mm.
And most business owners jaws would drop, and I'm like, how do you do that? And that's really, when you flip it on its head, that was the expectation of how charities should run. So when I started to see that, it really was thinking about it, well, this clearly doesn't work very well. It's not a very effective way to actually operate. We need to think about this differently. So I started to think about, as in the business world, I was a very effective sales and business development manager. It was the thing I spent the least amount of time on in the charity because I was so busy doing board reports and budgets and building websites and the rest. And, we could really see, if you started to bring the business lens into it, to spend more time on actually bringing in the revenue, that was the thing I needed to spend the time on, but we were still going to have a restriction on the resources that we had. So what came from that idea was to really look at how we could do that more effectively with the business community. We had aspired for years to get this wonderful silver bullet corporate partnership, and that was never going to happen. We were a small organisation, and big corporate partners were not looking for partnerships with small charities. So I reached to the small business sector, many of which were donating to us personally through their own sort of personal funds. And when I spoke to them, I realized that I was asking, why do you do this personally but not through your business? And started to explore what were the barriers there for them to actually contribute through their businesses. And, some of it was very, they come from an altruistic place. They just want to give. I don't need to have this through my business. I don't need to talk about it. Might be one of the reasons. And others, it's quite often just simply they didn't know how to do that through their business. They didn't know how to fundraise through their business. So that's where I saw there was a real opportunity to provide that support to people that had businesses to fundraise through their business, but also to help the businesses leverage that better, so that they could actually communicate out to their customers, out to their staff, that they're actually giving back, and this is the way that they were doing it, and that in turn would actually help them to increase their sales, to have better customer retention. So there's lots of benefits that are there for business in leveraging the charity partnership. We know that because the big guys, the big corporates have whole departments that focus on this. So there's obviously got to be a benefit. And so that was really the opportunity that I saw, was to bring that to the small business sector. And there wasn't an easy way to do that. So I sort of had to create that program and create a model that was going to make that as easy as possible.
Yeah, right. So when did you start Dovetail?
Well, the concept really started when I was at the charity. We started formulating some ways to do that. But it was only after I left there that I looked at the opportunity to see, because I was really looking for how to scale this. How can you actually make this effective for more than, there were so many charity founders that I knew personally that I was sort of struggling in my head to think, how can I actually get this out to scale so that it can be utilised across all of these smaller charities? Because I knew that they were all suffering the same sort of burnout. They had all the same struggles as what I had. And yet I knew that there was a way to actually have this work, because the uptake And the response that I got when I was working in the charity was so great. I think I was at 60% of my goal within the first 6 months.
Wow.
Before it was even launched, just in testing it out in the marketplace, to say, the feedback was wonderful. They loved it, and they were really committed to making that work. So I knew that it had legs, and we just had to get it out to scale.
Yeah, brilliant. So that was when?
So this is going back to about 2017.
Okay. So you've established there's a clear need, you see the opportunity, you start Dovetail in order to fill that. So what does the model look like? Can you talk us through the proposition?
Yes, absolutely. So what I think the main barriers that are there for businesses when you're looking at it in a general sense is that, and the thing that I hear all the time is, which charity do I choose? There are actually 60,000 registered charities in Australia. I know, it's mind-blowing. And of course, people are confused about which ones are the right ones to choose, what's going to be a good fit for their business, and also the due diligence side. How do you actually know that they're spending the money in the right way, and is it actually making a difference? So there's a lot of questions that sort of are right there at the get-go. Then they're looking at, well, how am I actually going to do this in my business? So if you're going to, a lot of people have it's a bit of a myth or misconception that it only comes through profits out of your own business. So that may be a concern or barrier, because people then think that they have to actually be making a lot of money to get started in this, or you have to be really profitable or established to start, when that's not necessarily the case. And then the next challenge was, even if they do have a charity that they choose, and a lot of people prefer to work with the smaller ones, is that the small charities are so under-resourced. They're not necessarily getting responded to in a timely way. They may not be getting the feedback from them that they're actually, the impact that their contribution is making. And so they don't really get that sense of real satisfaction and, that they've made a difference. So all of those sorts of barriers that are there, I had to address. So I sort of found out what they all were. So part of our program is that we've done that due diligence. We've actually shortlisted 10 charities, and we cover a range of different causes and try and cover as many of the United Nations Global Development Goals across those. So it might be animal welfare, it might be mental health, it might be around domestic violence, Indigenous education. And we've actually done that due diligence and checked out those charities, made sure that they've got all of the right things in place. They have their insurances, they're doing their reporting, having a look at their financials, and that they've actually got some proven results. We know that, that they're actually doing really, really great work, but they're at a point where they could really get some support to take things up to the next level. Yeah. And what I've seen and heard, and this has been confirmed by quite a few business coaches, there's not a lot of difference between charities and business in this way, is that once you get to around that sort of $400,000 to $500,000 turnover, they're generally founder-led, and they may have quite a few volunteers supporting them. Taking it up past that is where they hit the block. And that's where you've got to expand your team. You're at capacity as the founder. So that is the place that we like to work with the charities, because our proposition isn't just about fundraising for those particular charities. Our proposition is that we're actually going to, through these business partnerships, support the charities to grow and scale. So whatever it is that they need to take things up to the next level. So for some of them, it may simply be paying the founder. Quite often the founders might be working other jobs and doing this on the side part-time. It could be that they need a professional fundraiser or partnerships manager. They might need social media or marketing support, or they could even just simply need a website that, that actually takes online donations. So whatever those things are, we work with them to identify what they are. We provide them with a budget of $5,000 a month to actually cover through the partnerships. And what our goal is that we find 50 businesses that will each pay $100 a month.
Sorry, can you just go back to that bit a moment? You give the charities $5,000 a month for what?
We don't give them $50,000 at 5,000, we actually
5,000.
Yes, we allocate a budget of $5,000 a month towards that capacity building, whether it's paying the founder, partnerships manager, whatever it is that they need to grow.
Got you. Okay. Yep.
And then the goal for us is to help get 50 businesses, each giving $100 a month, and that gives you your 5,000 that will pay that particular role or whatever that initiative is.
Right.
Now, if the businesses are paying that regularly on a monthly basis, the charity then knows they've got that funds in that bank account, it's a separate bank account that they can utilise for that particular initiative, so that they can actually employ that person. They know they'll have that regular income coming in to cover that salary or whatever it is, that commitment that they've made. And that then allows them to have that underwritten for the next year or two until that's bringing a return on investment.
That's great.
Yeah. Then on the other side, of course, the charity needs money to do their programs.
Yeah.
So we actually support the businesses over the next year to fundraise another $400 a month on average.
Yeah.
To go directly to the programs that charity delivers. Now, why we have 100 and 400 is we work on the basis that the 20% that the charities are allowed to have, I say in inverted commas, to run their operations, that's the $100. The 20% is $100. The $100 they pay directly to the charity for the running.
Yep.
The $400 goes towards the programs that they deliver. And that way, the business then can say to their customers or to their staff, every cent that you fundraise or donate is going to this particular project, because we're already supporting and taking care of the charity ourselves. And so that just really, as much as I don't necessarily agree with that perception of how, the donor dollar gets used, that is what it is. And we're not going to change that overnight. So it's sort of working within the constraints of what we have, but structured in a way that actually can still deliver what the charity needs to grow and also funding their programs. Now, if we have 50 businesses each doing that, it's $6,000 each business a year. That's $300,000 that charity will get through this program. So
it's amazing.
Yeah. And for a lot of them, that means they're doubling their revenue.
And also from the business's perspective, I mean, you've talked about small businesses supporting small charities, but many small businesses, I know we've talked about this, are supporting bigger charities. But because they're big charities, they're just not getting any input from them at all. And they're a small fish in a very big ocean.
That's right. That's right. So the ACNC have released some data just recently around giving in the Australian market, and it showed that the SME sector within business is actually really pulling its weight. It's I think it was around 40% of that money that's coming in from the business sector is actually coming, from the small business sector. Yet the majority of the funds are still going to, I think it's the top 4% of charities.
Wow.
So, that means that they are, and this is what I've seen very much as well, is that small businesses are very generous, but they tend to jump onto the campaigns that are out there every day, like Movember, like, this push-up challenge or whatever it might be, where the majority of those funds can go through to some of the biggest charities, which is, they're doing great work, but it just means that, those small charities are not able to compete in that market because they do not have the budget to run those sort of campaigns. So, we're looking at those opportunities of how can we actually just shift that focus over to support some of these smaller charities that are doing amazing work and just need that foot up to sort of take things up to the next level.
Enjoying the podcast? If you're looking for more inspiration, head to our website, thecauseeffects.com.au, for more resources on how you can start using your business as a force for good. Or buy the For Love and Money book. Every copy sold allows us to protect 1 square metre of rainforest. Help us save 10,000 square metres by 2025.
I love the way that you have developed something that, it's small steps. it's achievable. For a small business, the numbers you're talking about are achievable numbers.
Yes.
And so, for those who do want to get involved, it gives them access to impact partners, charities, that their support is going to be so meaningful to those smaller partners and create so much value. And I think that's amazing. I'd love if you could share with us some of your charity partners.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, we've got a real range. There's definitely, since COVID, been a real focus for people to focus back on Australian-based organisations. So the majority of them are. We do have a couple that actually operate, are Australian charities, but operate overseas. We have Just Peoples, and they work through Asia, Africa, and parts of South America. And they do some really fabulous work doing sort of micro investment and working with very grassroots local people and change makers and supporting them. Incredible work. We also have Rita Shine, who they help to prevent young girls in Cambodia going into the sex trafficking trade, which is an incredibly huge problem that exists over in Cambodia. And Nikki from Rita Shine's been doing an amazing job with that. And then to some of our more local ones, we've got the Australian Pet Welfare Foundation, so that we can actually support people who really love their fur babies. They have been advocating for quite a few years around having pet euthanasia drop to zero. That's their goal, is having pet euthanasia drop to zero. And they've already started to make an incredible impact in that space. They've got a cat to sexing program that they do. They also have worked very much in challenging the rental market, for people not being able to take pets into the rental market. So they've actually made some great changes there, which of course helps to stop people's pets if they can't move and take their pet. That's obviously a really tough decision. And we've also got an organisation called Ocean Mind, who work with young people around their mental health through surf clinics. They're based in Torquay in Victoria. And they've just been doing some amazing work and are now actually working with Deakin University and having studies done on the impact of their program with children with mental health and young people. And so just really kicking some great goals. They're doing an amazing job.
I love the range of charities you've got, the model you've set up. What is the purpose of Dovetail?
The purpose is actually to make ourselves defunct and not needed anymore. Yep. That is the purpose. But really, it's to empower the charities to grow and scale and build sustainable business models to a point that they don't need us anymore. So, the 10 charities that we've got at the moment are a pilot program because we're in our first couple of years. I think that we can really demonstrate that this model of turning businesses into social impact investors can really work. And once we can demonstrate the change that we can deliver through this program, we'll look at scaling it up so that we can get a lot more into it. But at this stage, it's really just to grow them from that, whatever they may be, at $400,000 or $500,000 to over $2 million turnover. And at that point, they should have the infrastructure, they should have the resources, the team that they need, that they don't actually need our support directly anymore. So we can graduate them out of the program and from there bring in new ones as well.
That's brilliant. And I just wrote down there, I love, turning small businesses into social impact investors.
Yeah.
The other thing with that, I think, is, corporates, bigger business are now going to have to report on ESG activities. And that, that's not going to be something that small businesses need to worry about, I don't believe, at this stage. But the simple fact is, stakeholders all over have their expectations of any business is increasing, and they expect businesses to do far more than they are currently doing in creating positive societal impact. So what you're doing is such a solid, strategic and collective way of doing it. I think it's amazing. Well done, you.
Thank you. Thank you. And look, I think there's still a lot of education that needs to happen out in the marketplace, in the SME sector around the value proposition that this actually has. We have lots of studies that are coming out from Deloitte and McKinsey that actually talk about purpose-led organisations and the value that brings to the marketplace, and that consumers are now demanding this, that they expect that businesses are actually contributing back. And, small business sector, I think, aren't seeing this yet quite as an opportunity. It's a nice thing to do, and they come from an altruistic place, which is fabulous, but really looking at it through your business lens and seeing that 4 out of 5 customers are actually actively buying from and choosing companies and businesses that are putting back to community. They're taking care of the planet. So if you're not communicating or doing that, that's a massive opportunity that you're missing. And it's only going one way at the moment as well. So it's just going to become more of an essential part of business. And small businesses have got enough challenges, enough demands. So if we can make that as easy as possible, then that's a really great service to be able to provide to the business sector as well.
100%. And I want to pick up on the communicating part, because there is a mindset amongst many in small business, which is, we give back, but we don't talk about it because we don't need to talk about it. It's just something that we do. And that mindset belongs in last century, really, doesn't it? Because people do want to know what you're doing. And not only do they want to know what you're doing, they want to help you in what you're doing. So it's not just about a small business, donating, money from their profits. That small business could potentially be inviting its clients or customers to be taking part in some sort of initiative or something like that. So
yeah, absolutely. And there is lots of evidence to show that people will actually pay more for a product if they know a portion is going to charity. So you can actually charge a premium and so be more profitable. They love that they're doing this, so they're going to tell their friends about it as well. So your business will actually get referred a lot more because you're doing good. And the customer retention is another really high priority that comes up as well. So that's something else that can be really positively impacted by just having that, communicated well. And this is one thing that I do see, and I have conversations with businesses all the time that are actually doing this work quite well. But, I did a review of a customer recently, a potential customer, and they have a whole page dedicated to what they're doing. And they've supported a bunch of different charities recently. But I sort of read the page and I'm like, I can't quite get what you stand for. I sort of see you're working with these people and they're around fathers, and another one around domestic violence, but it kind of didn't really communicate. Looked at their social media, looked at what the buying process, and there were a lot of opportunities that I could suggest to them where they could actually reinforce and really, I think, tell the story about what they were really committed to as a business, so that they could actually have their customers really feel like they were going on that journey with them as well. So that they really could buy into whatever that story was and whatever that commitment was. I could hear it in the voice of the business owner, but it just wasn't communicating out there.
It's amazing. It's amazing, isn't it? It is like sometimes you see it. It is such untapped potential. And it's not about, getting tickets on yourself and saying, look at me, look at what I'm doing. It's about saying we care enough about this to do this, and we want others who have a similar vision to actually come and join us and help us do more of it.
That's right. And people want to make a difference. That's just intrinsic in who we are as human beings. I think they do want to make a difference, and you've got to make it as easy as possible for them. And so part of our process with working with our clients is actually providing them with all the resources to talk about the charity, to, have the little blurb that goes onto their invoices, goes onto the bottom of their email signature, that they can include in their newsletter every month, so that they're constantly, being able to help share that story about what they're really committed to.
Brilliant. And the clients that you bring in, do they skew to a certain industry or business category, or is it just across the board?
Not so far, but what did really surprise me at the beginning was the early adopters were very small. I'm talking solopreneurs, maybe have 2 or 3 staff. So that was really interesting because that probably challenged my own preconceptions about who would actually tap into this. The other one that really surprised me as well, I sort of have different levels of support. The base level of support to come into our program starts at $55 a month. Then, of course, I have my sort of premium service, which is actually taking people away on charity challenges, doing like a 3-day Great Ocean Walk or something like that, which was kind of like, oh, I'd love to get one of those one day, kind of thing. And that actually happened within the first 6 months. So,
wow. Can you share that with us?
About charity challenges.
Yeah.
So look, there's certainly a real passion of mine. That's what I was the main way that I used to fundraise for the charity I was involved with. And I just find it such a wonderful way to really engage a community, because people have gone past from that time of just handing over money or handing over a check. They kind of want to be more involved. And so with the charity challenges, it's taking on a physical challenge, which could be a 3-day, you're walking sort of 50 kilometres over 3 days, or it could be cycling 500 kilometres from Cambodia to Vietnam, for instance. And there's a whole, lead up to that where you have to do the physical training, you have to fundraise to cover the, to actually participating in it. And the goals could be up to sort of, raising $5,000 or $10,000 for those. But it's a real commitment, and there is a real bond that actually happens with people that are doing and going on that journey together. And what I've also found is that when people commit to that sort of project, you tend to get really awesome people. You don't get assholes coming on those sort of trips because they are just not interested in that sort of commitment. So really find that, the whole journey that they have leading up, doing all the training, doing all the fundraising, and then going and experiencing that trip of actually being on the back of a bike for 7 days and riding through tropical heat and villages and interacting with kids that, are just happy to stand on the side of the road and give you a high five. It's such a magical and life-changing experience. And so those sorts of trips, I think, are just fabulous for bringing a team together. You might want to do it with your customers. It could be, within another part of your community that you want to sort of really engage. And it's also a really great way to raise money that doesn't come out of the business's pocket, because each of the people participating are actually going out to their network to fundraise as well. So it can be a really great way to raise some very solid fundraising money.
What a fabulous idea. Do you have any of those coming up for any of your clients at the moment?
The next ones we're planning are fairly local. So we're looking at the Great Ocean Walk is always a great one. That's a 3-day trip that's done. And then we're looking at some others that are around sort of 3 to 4 days that are hiking, because they're very popular at the moment. And I'm really, really keen to get back to do some of the trips through Asia as well. The cycling challenges in Asia are really magical, because they're very heavy populated countries, and you're riding through villages as well as, some of the other beautiful landscapes as well.
It sounds incredible. Kirrily, we've collaborated. I've known what you do, but just this has been a deeper dive that has opened my eyes to, some of the deeper work you're doing, which is fantastic. What's your vision, like 3 years from now? What would you hope? I know you said, the purpose is to make Dovetail defunct, but in about 3 years from now, what would be your hope?
There's probably 2 things. I'd love to see that we're at a point that our pilot program is at that point where we've really got some documented case studies of how effective this program can be, and that we're ready to scale and to take it up to the next level, so that we can bring as many charities in as possible. I've got a wait list already, as you can imagine, that ones that would like to come in. So to be able to scale it would be fabulous. But also, I think the other thing that's there for me is that going through this journey over the past couple of years of establishing Dovetail's program, it's just highlighted so many other things that we could be doing to support the charities in growing their capacity and capability. So I've already got another project on the side, which is to actually develop a program that will have charities dovetail ready, I say, that will go through and make sure that they've got all their due diligence in place, they've got all of their fundraising strategy, their business plan, all of the governance side done. There is nothing that really exists out there that is accessible to support startup charities and small charities to grow and scale. So, that's by that stage, I'd love to have, really have something in place to bring that to market as well.
What a wonderful vision. That's incredible. Kirrily, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Is there anything else you would like our listeners to know about Dovetail? And you will include all your contact details in the show notes. But is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for any business that's looking to explore this, you may be ready to come and talk to me about joining the program, but you may just like to join our Network for Good community as well. We hold regular events which are all about how to educate the small business sector about how they can bring just doing a little bit more good in their business, whether that's through how they purchase, how they look after their staff, or how they can actually look and give back to community. So the Network for Good we've got groups on LinkedIn and Facebook. So you can look out for that on our website, and I'll provide a link directly to join into that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And we'll put links on the show notes to those directly as well. Thank you so much for sharing your time and telling us what you do. And it's been an absolute delight to learn more about Dovetail.
Thanks, Carolyn. I love working and collaborating with you. It's just been such a fantastic journey.
Partnerships for impact, right?
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?